The clash of civilizations has come to the shores of Australia. Yesterday, December 14th, at approximately 6:45 p.m. local time, over 1,000 people were celebrating Hanukkah by the sea at Bondi Beach in Sydney. Families, children, elderly, Holocaust survivors, they were there to light the menorah, share traditional foods, and mark the beginning of the 8-day Festival of Lights. Then, without warning, two men dressed in black opened fire with shotguns and rifles, spraying bullets into the crowd for what witnesses described as 10 agonizing, horrifying minutes. When the dust cleared, 15 people lay dead. The attackers were identified as 50-year-old Sajid Akram and his 24-year-old son Naveed. Sajid, who immigrated to Australia from Pakistan in 1998 on a student visa, was killed in a shootout with police. Naveed, Australian-born and unemployed, remains hospitalized in critical condition under close police guard. Both men had told their family they were going on a fishing trip to the South Coast. Instead, they brought 6 legally owned firearms, improvised explosive devices, and ISIS flags to a Jewish holiday celebration. Counterterrorism officials believe the father and son pledged allegiance to the Islamic State before the attack. And here's the part that frankly should have everyone's blood boiling, but most particularly Australians. Australia's Domestic Intelligence Agency, ASIO, had investigated Naveed Akram 6 years ago in 2019 for his close ties to a Sydney-based ISIS cell. He was connected to convicted Islamic State terrorists, including a man serving 7 years for plotting an ISIS insurgency as the self-declared Australian commander. ASIO examined him for 6 months and concluded that he posed no ongoing threat. So how did that assessment work out for them? Now, of course, the Australian Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, is calling this horror an act of pure evil and anti-Semitic terrorism. But we're finding out that this attack didn't happen in a vacuum. Australia has been experiencing an unprecedented surge in anti-Semitic violence. In 2024 alone, the Community Security Group recorded over 1,000 anti-Semitic incidents, a 26% increase from 2023, which itself saw an 88% spike in such attacks. That's a 316% increase as compared to pre-October 7th levels. In the year leading up to September 2024, Australia recorded over 1,600 anti-Jewish incidents, 3 times higher than any annual total before the Gaza war. A Melbourne synagogue was firebombed in December of 24, an attack later treated as terrorism. Jewish homes and cars have been vandalized with, quote, "Kill Israel" graffiti. A kosher delicatessen in Sydney was recently torched. And Australian intelligence has determined that Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps orchestrated multiple anti-Semitic arson attacks against the Jewish community, leading Australia to expel Iran's ambassador and list the IRGC as a state sponsor of terrorism. But perhaps most maddening of all was the Australian government's immediate response to the Bondi Beach massacre. The Prime Minister, Albanese, almost immediately denounced, I kid you not, right-wing extremism in Australia. That's right, right-wing extreme, not Islamic extremism, not radicalization networks, and of course not the failure of their own intelligence agencies. No, of course not. No, right-wing extremism. And not to be outdone, the New South Wales Premier Chris Minns pushed for more gun control, with which the Prime Minister Albanese is in full agreement. He's already announced plans to implement stricter national gun laws, including limits on the number of firearms a licensed person can own and periodic reviews of gun licenses. No one's quite sure how that would have helped in this situation, given that Sajid Akram was a licensed gun owner who had held his firearms license for 10 years with 0 incidents. All 6 firearms used in the attack were legally registered to him. He passed all background checks. He met all eligibility criteria for a hunting license used for recreational purposes. But then again, left-wing lunacy never fails to fulfill its job description anywhere in the world, most especially in Australia. Case in point, here's the reaction from one left-wing member of the Australian Parliament in the wake of the attack.
I think it's important to note that the escalation of this narrative of who we're against and how much we want to divide each other and how much we want to attack each other, that is really at the core of a lot of the problems that we have in the country at the moment. And I firmly believe that people are good and that given the opportunity, they will look out for each other. And I just want to say that as much as possible, we should try and detoxify the way that we think of people who aren't like us, because our diversity in this country is our strength.
So diversity is our strength. That's the message that the Australian government, and particularly the political left, is sending to its shocked and shattered citizens. Diversity is our strength. Gun control and diversity. That's how we're going to respond to this. That's what we really need. Diversity and gun control. I can assure you that the Australians are emphatically not agreeing with that assessment. In fact, I'm going to show you why the real casualty on that beach was liberalism itself. But first, if you've been wanting to get into crypto investing but have been turned off by its volatility, I want to introduce you to your new best friend. Meet Block Trust IRA. They have a super AI system that Bitcoin Magazine has named the #1 crypto technology platform in the world. That's among 1,500 global competitors. And what that super AI does is it works 24/7 to analyze global market data, and it predicts with uncanny accuracy the highs and the lows of crypto volatility. Block Trust IRA sells at the highs and then buys again at the lows, and that mitigates the volatility, all the while you stand to make incredible gains. That's why I'm a proud client of Block Trust IRA. I have my own account with them, and I can tell you, honestly, I love them, and I know you will too. So if you've never gotten into the crypto game yet, let Block Trust IRA ease you in. Click on that link below or visit turleytalkscrypto.com and find out how they can help you join the Trump financial revolution, finally giving forgotten Americans access to the greatest crypto wealth opportunity in history. And for a limited time, they're offering my viewers up to $2,500 in bonus crypto when you open up an account with them. This is amazing stuff. Don't wait on this. Visit turleytalkscrypto.com. That's turleytalkscrypto.com. The images from Bondi Beach represent more than just another terrorist attack. They mark the undeniable arrival of a civilizational conflict on Australian shores. When a father and son, motivated by Islamist ideology and carrying ISIS flags, opened fire on Jewish families celebrating Hanukkah, one of the world's most iconic beaches, they shattered the illusion of ideological liberalism. In the early 90s, just after the fall of the Soviet Union, the Harvard political scholar Sam Huntington made the argument that the conflicts that would dominate the 21st century would no longer involve ideological conflicts per se, like we saw during the Cold War era and the battle between Western liberalism and Soviet communism. Instead, the conflicts that would pervade the next century would all be centered on identity, and most particularly civilizational identity. And this is largely because of a process known as reterritorialization. Fancy schmancy word to describe what's happening today, but basically as international globalist structures and institutions fracture and break up, political power and decision-making is returning to the local. It's escaping the grip of a centralized globalist elite, and that political power is returning to populations all around the world. And those populations are reasserting their political power. And because the politics is radically local, the key driver of that power is a population's own identity and uniqueness. Again, the key here is that transnational ideology like communism or liberalism is no longer the dominant paradigm for politics today. The dominant paradigm is collectively the frames of reference of identity, nation, culture, custom, tradition, and most especially religion. What we saw in that horror over the weekend in Australia wasn't gang violence, right? It wasn't mental illness. It wasn't a random act of madness. This was a deliberate strike against one civilization by adherents of another. It's actually basically that simple. It was a deliberate strike against one civilization by adherents of another. The exact scenario Sam Huntington predicted would dominate conflicts in the 21st century. The attackers didn't target Bondi Beach for its strategic value or its monetary value or any kind of pragmatic value, military value or whatever. They targeted it because Jewish children were celebrating their heritage and because the attack, of course, would send shockwaves through every Western nation watching. Australia has now joined the growing list of Western democracies like France, Germany, Sweden, Britain, and the United States, where imported identity conflicts have manifested in bloodshed on domestic soil. And the response coming from the left-wing government there in Australia, gun control and diversity slogans, is precisely why civilizational populism is surging throughout the West. There's a reason why right-wing populism has become so overwhelmingly popular in nations like France and Germany and Sweden and the UK, and of course here in the United States with the rise of MAGA. Ideological liberalism is simply incapable of responding effectively to this civilizational clash. Ideological liberalism literally lacks the frames of reference necessary for properly understanding and effectively responding to these growing conflicts based on civilizational identity. Liberalism, by definition, consists of transnational, transcultural, trans-civilizational tenets like human rights, civil rights, reproductive rights, LGBT rights, right? If I just went down that list and I said, our nation holds to human rights, civil rights, reproductive rights, you wouldn't know which nation I was talking about. And it's because these rights, by definition, transcend nation, right? Liberals hold that government institutions should be blind to cultural difference, providing all citizens with a uniform set of rights and liberties without any preference whatsoever for any particular religious or cultural worldview. As such, liberalism is structurally incapable of comprehending or even remotely effectively responding to civilizational clashes, precisely because its foundational premises of universalism and moral neutrality and cultural relativism systematically blind its adherents to the reality that not all cultures and civilizations share its assumptions about human nature, politics, or the purpose of society. This is precisely why populist movements are exploding across the Western world. Ordinary citizens watch their governments import populations with fundamentally incompatible value systems, watch intelligence agencies investigate known extremists and then declare them to be no threat, watch massacres unfold at children's holiday celebrations, and then watch those same governments blame inanimate objects rather than confront civilizational incompatibility. More and more populations are turning away from weak liberal leaders who are more afraid of being called racist than of telling the truth. And they're turning to politicians willing to name the problem and who are equally willing to confront the civilizational conflict effectively and faithfully. Until then, until Western nations as a whole demand assimilation, confront incompatible ideologies, and prioritize their own citizens' safety over multicultural pieties, the body count will continue to rise, as will civilizational populism. Do you want to ask me your biggest questions and maybe win free merch while you're at it? Well, join my Courageous Patriot Club and be part of the uncensored Monday night Q&A, all for only $10 a month at turley.pub/club.